Legionnaire's disease. Hear about it, right? Headlines pop up, usually about an outbreak somewhere. But what if it's more than just a news story? What if it's this? A silent threat, potentially lurking in water systems all around us, places we use every day. Do you really know what it takes to prevent it? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're peeling back the layers on understanding and, crucially, managing the risks of Legionnaire's disease. We're focusing specifically on what employers, landlords, facility managers, anyone in control of premises needs to know, what their responsibilities are. And our guide for this is based entirely on the vital guidance from the Health and Safety Executive, the HSE. They spell out exactly what must be done to control Legionella. So our mission today is pretty clear. We want to pull out the really important stuff from what can feel like, well, pretty dense regulations. Think of this as your shortcut to getting properly informed. We want to give you actionable insights, real knowledge you can use to prevent this very serious illness. Okay, let's dive right in then. It sounds like quite a bit to handle. So for someone owning or managing a property or an employer, what's the absolute starting point? What's the fundamental duty?
Right, the core duty. It's actually crystal clear. If you're an employer or anyone in control of premises, and yeah, that absolutely includes landlords, you're responsible for health and safety.
Yeah.
Full stop. And that means you must take the right precautions to reduce the risks of exposure to Legionella bacteria.
Okay, so it's a definite must-do. What does that break down into? Are there specific things you need to focus on?
There are essentially 5 main duties. First, identify and assess all your sources of risk. Second, you need to manage those risks effectively. Third, actively prevent or control them. Fourth, keep meticulous records. That's crucial. And fifth, carry out any other related duties that might apply.
That sounds comprehensive. And I guess this isn't just HSE saying, please do this. There's real legal weight behind it.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't optional advice. It's grounded in law. Several pieces of legislation actually work together here. You've got the Health and Safety at Work Act, the HSWA, which covers Legionella risks from work activities. Then there's the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations, MHSWR. That gives you the broad framework for managing health and safety overall. More specifically, you have COSH, the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health Regulations. That provides a really detailed framework for assessing and controlling risks from harmful substances, including bacteria like Legionella.
Right, COSHH, I've heard of that one.
Exactly. And then, very importantly, there's the Approved Code of Practice, known as L8. Its full title is Legionnaire's Disease, the Control of Legionella Bacteria in Water Systems. That's your practical, hands-on guide for managing the risks day to day.
So it's like layers of law building up.
Precisely. And what's really interesting, I think, is how these different pieces interlock. They create this comprehensive safety net. It's designed so that managing the risk becomes just part of how you operate safely, not just ticking boxes.
Okay, legal basis established. Let's get practical. First steps. You mentioned identifying risks. How do you even begin to figure out where the dangers might be in a complex water system, and who actually has to do that?
Well, carrying out that risk assessment, that's your responsibility as the employer or person in control. No delegation of responsibility there. Now, you can do it yourself, but only if you're competent.
Competent. What does that mean in this context?
Good question. A competent person is someone who has the right mix, sufficient training, experience, knowledge, and, well, other qualities needed to assist properly. If you don't have that competence in-house, you must get help. That could be from someone else in your organization, or you might bring in an external consultant.
Okay, so find someone competent or be competent yourself. Then what? What are they actually looking for? What are the red flags in a water system?
Right, so you need to really understand your system, every bit of it. You're hunting for conditions that could lead to Legionella exposure. The biggest red flag, the absolute classic, is water temperature. Specifically, water anywhere in the system sitting between 20 and 45 degrees Celsius. That's the danger zone. Prime breeding temperature.
20 to 45. Got it. What else?
You also need to look at whether water is stored or recirculated. Think about tanks or long pipe runs. And are there nutrients present? Things like rust, sludge, scale, organic matter, or biofilms. Legionella love that stuff.
Biofilms, slimy layers inside pipes.
Exactly. You also need to consider just general conditions that might encourage bacteria to multiply. And critically, think about how water droplets could be produced and spread. Aerosols, so showers, spray taps, cooling towers, anything that makes a fine mist.
Because that's how people inhale it.
Precisely. And finally, who might be exposed? Are there susceptible people around? Older people, those with illnesses, weakened immune systems. They're at higher risk. It's easy sometimes to miss the less obvious things, like slightly warm, stagnant water. It doesn't look dirty, but it can be a real problem.
Are some systems just inherently riskier, things people should automatically pay more attention to?
Yes, definitely. Evaporative cooling systems, cooling towers, they're high on the list. Hot and cold water systems, obviously. Spa pools are another classic risk area. And basically any other system your assessment identifies is likely to pose a risk.
And this risk assessment, it needs to be written down properly, not just notes on a pad.
Absolutely. It must be documented. And it needs to cover specific things. Management responsibilities, including who the competent person is, a full description of your system, maybe a schematic diagram. It needs to detail the competence and training of key staff, list all the potential risk sources you found, explain how you'll prevent or control those risks, detail your monitoring, inspection, and maintenance procedures, keep records of all your results and checks, and, crucially, state how and when you'll review the assessment, especially if something changes or you think it might not be valid anymore.
Okay, so you do all that thorough assessment. And let's say it comes back showing the risk is really low and you've got good controls. Is that it? Job done. File it away.
Not quite job done forever. If the assessment genuinely shows no reasonably foreseeable risk, or that any low risks are already properly managed according to the law, then yes, the assessment part is complete for now. You might not need major new actions immediately, but, and this is big but, you absolutely must keep up whatever existing controls you have in place, and you must review that assessment regularly. Systems change, usage changes, complacency is definitely the enemy here.
Right, so it's an ongoing process. We've talked about the technical side, temps, pipes, biofilms. But you said earlier managing this isn't just technical, it's about people, isn't it? So after the risk assessment, what's the next step regarding human oversight, accountability?
You're absolutely spot on. It really does come down to people making sure things happen correctly. As the employer or person in control, you must appoint someone competent to help you fulfill your health and safety duties. This person takes specific responsibility for controlling the Legionella risk. We often call them the responsible person.
You're responsible person.
And they need the clout to do the job. Sufficient authority, competence, the right skills, proper knowledge of the specific water system, and relevant experience. They're your go-to person, the one ensuring the plan is actually followed.
Who can that be? Does it have to be some external Legionella guru? Or can it be Fred from maintenance?
Well, it could be Fred from maintenance if Fred meets the competence criteria we talked about. It could be you yourself, it could be one or more of your workers, or yes, it could be someone from outside your business, an external consultant. The title isn't as important as the actual competence.
And what if you need multiple people, like for different shifts or different parts of a big site?
That's a really important point. If you do have multiple people involved, maybe because of shift patterns or just the complexity of the operation, it is absolutely essential that everyone knows exactly what their specific responsibilities are. And crucially, how their role fits into the bigger picture, the overall risk management strategy for the system. Clarity of roles is absolutely paramount. No finger pointing later.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I can imagine some people listening might think, right, I'll just hire a specialist water treatment company. They can handle it all. Does that work? Can you just outsource the responsibility like that?
That's a really common and potentially dangerous misconception. If you hire contractors, say, for water treatment or cleaning or testing, the competent person you appointed still holds the ultimate responsibility.
Oh, okay.
Your duty of care doesn't just vanish because you've paid someone else. You need to be satisfied before you hire them that they are competent and can do the work to the required standards.
So you need to check them out properly.
Yes. You look into their experience, qualifications, training, whether they belong to professional organizations or trade bodies. There are helpful external schemes, too, like codes of conduct for service providers. The British Standards Institute even has a standard specifically for Legionella risk assessment services. Using competent contractors is good, but you remain accountable. Ultimately, as you said, the effectiveness of the whole thing, it really hinges on that clear accountability and making sure the people managing the risk, whether internal or external, are genuinely competent.
Right. Okay. Risks identified, responsible person appointed, contractors vetted. Now for the action. What's the actual battle plan? How do you actively stop Legionella from growing?
Good question. The very first thing always is to ask, can we prevent this risk entirely?
Like get rid of the source?
Exactly. For instance, if you have a wet cooling tower, could you maybe replace it with a dry air-cooled system? That removes the water element, where Legionella thrives. Prevention is always better than control. But if you can't prevent it, then the overarching goal is clear:
Design, maintain, and operate your water services in a way that prevents Legionella growth, or at least adequately controls it.
And how much does basic cleanliness factor in? Is it just about scrubbing pipes, or is it more involved?
Oh, system cleanliness is absolutely fundamental. But yeah, it's often more than just a simple scrub. It's about systematic hygiene. How you clean, how often you disinfect, that depends very much on the specific system you have. Is it routine cleaning, or are you responding to a problem found during monitoring? Your risk assessment should dictate the frequency. It'll consider things like whether it's an open system like a cooling tower or closed like heating pipes, what kind of contamination might be present, who could be exposed.
Yeah.
And for things like cooling tower packs, the fill material, if they're easily removable, that makes inspection much easier. But whether you remove them or not, you need evidence they're clean, you need to assess them properly, use the right techniques, and crucially, record what you find. It's all about making the environment hostile to the bacteria.
So if you can't totally prevent the risk and you've got your cleaning sorted, what's next? Is there like a formal plan needed?
Yes. If you've identified a risk that you can't prevent, then having a written control scheme isn't optional, it's mandatory.
Right, the written control scheme.
This document is absolutely vital. It's your roadmap for managing the risk and making sure your control measures are effective. It needs to describe your system thoroughly, maybe include a schematic diagram so it's clear. It must state who is responsible for the risk assessment and for implementing the scheme. It needs to outline how to operate your system safely and correctly. It details the specific control methods you're using, temperature control, biocides, whatever it is, and any other precautions. And really importantly, it specifies what checks you'll carry out and how often to make sure those controls are actually working. It's your blueprint for ongoing safety.
Could you give us some examples? What are some of those key control measures that would typically be in that scheme?
Sure. Key things would include properly controlling the release of any water spray or aerosols, meticulously avoiding water temperatures in that danger zone, 20 to 45 degrees Celsius, keeping water flowing, avoiding stagnation. That means keeping pipe runs short where possible, removing dead legs or redundant pipework.
Dead legs, pipes that go nowhere.
Exactly. They're prime spots for stagnation. You should also avoid using materials in the system that actually help Legionella grow. There are resources like the Water Fittings and Materials Directory that list approved materials for UK water systems. Beyond that, it's about keeping the system and the water clean, as we discussed, treating the water appropriately to control or limit microbial growth, consistently monitoring your control measures, checking temperatures, biocide levels, whatever applies, and as I keep saying, keeping detailed records of absolutely everything you do, including any maintenance or repair work. Each step is like a barrier.
It does sound incredibly thorough. But the big question then is, how do you actually know if all this effort is working? How do you track it? And when do you need to step back and reassess everything?
Yeah, that's where monitoring and record keeping become absolutely critical. They're not just bureaucratic hoops. They're how you prove your system is working and protect people.
Right.
Now, legally, if you have 5 or more employees, you must record the significant findings from your risk assessment. You need to write down who might be harmed and how and what steps you've taken to control the risks.
And if you have fewer than 5?
If you have fewer than 5 employees, you're not legally required to write it all down. However, the HSE strongly recommends it, and frankly, it's incredibly useful. It provides that clear audit trail and helps demonstrate you're managing things properly. It's just good practice.
Makes sense. What exactly needs to go in those records? What are the must-haves?
Okay, essentials for your records include who is responsible, the named competent persons for the assessment and the control scheme, the significant findings of the risk assessment itself, details of your written control scheme and how it's being implemented, information on the state of your system. Is it running normally? Has part of it been shut down? And then, crucially, the results of all your monitoring, inspections, tests, or checks, along with the dates they were carried out.
How long do you need to keep these records?
You need to keep them for the period they are current, plus at least 2 years after that. And for monitoring and inspection results specifically, you need to keep those for at least 5 years.
5 years for monitoring results. Okay. You mentioned monitoring and checking temperatures is key. Traditionally, that's someone walking around with a thermometer, right? But I think you mentioned technology is changing things.
That's right. Avoiding that 20 degrees C to 45 degrees C range, especially where water might stagnate, is fundamental. And yes, traditionally, that meant manual checks at taps, showers, or on pipe surfaces. But what's fascinating here is the emergence and increasing use of remote monitoring systems. These can be a real game changer.
How so?
Well, they offer the potential for much earlier detection if your control measures start to fail. They give you a more continuous, often more precise picture compared to intermittent manual checks.
How do they actually work?
Typically, they use temperature sensors. These might be attached to the outside of pipes or inserted directly into the water flow. They measure the temperature, maybe directly, maybe indirectly, by measuring the pipe surface. These sensors then send the readings back, usually wirelessly, to a central processing unit or a dashboard where you can review the data.
Clever. Any other benefits?
Yes, some systems can do more. By detecting the temperature changes when water flows through an outlet, they can actually provide information on how often taps or showers are being used. That helps identify those infrequently used outlets, which are a known risk factor for stagnation and Legionella growth.
So, potentially very powerful tools.
Definitely. But it's important to stress, implementing these systems shouldn't be a knee-jerk decision. It should always be based on your specific risk assessment and agreed upon by your competent person. They're a tool to support the management system, not replace it.
It still sounds like a significant ongoing commitment. How often do you think businesses kind of drop the ball on that continuous review? They do the assessment, set things up, and then think, done. What's the right way to keep revisiting your strategy?
That is such a common pitfall, unfortunately, thinking the job's done. But regular checking and reviewing your risk assessment is incredibly important. Why? Because it lets you gauge how well you're doing before something goes wrong, before an incident, an outbreak, or someone getting sick.
So, proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. The review should check if your plans are working, if your objectives are being met. Is your whole health and safety management system operating as intended? Are you meeting your own performance standards? For example, a simple check. Are your hot water outlets hitting at least 50 degrees C or 55 degrees C in healthcare within 1 minute of turning them on? That's a basic performance standard.
What sort of questions should you ask during that review?
You need to be quite systematic. Ask, is our risk assessment actually in place and up to date? Does it properly describe the system, including any bits that aren't used anymore? Does it correctly conclude there's no significant risk or detail the risks accurately? If there is a significant risk identified, is the written control scheme in place and being followed? Is the responsible person clearly identified in writing? Are all the roles, responsibilities, and necessary training for staffs clearly defined, again, in writing?
And what about contractors?
Yes, if you use external contractors, are their roles and responsibilities clearly defined in writing? And crucially, have you actually checked their competence, experience, qualifications, training, memberships, and don't forget other health and safety aspects? Have you done COHH assessments for any water treatment chemicals you use? What about safe access for maintenance, working at height, confined spaces, electrical safety around the system?
Right, it connects to wider safety.
It does. And remember, the frequency of your inspections and maintenance will depend on your specific system and the risks involved, but all of it must be recorded. It raises an important question, really. How often do organizations miss that vital opportunity for continuous improvement because they only react when there's a problem, instead of proactively reviewing their controls? It's a missed trick.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, nearly there. We've covered the core management cycle: assess, manage, control, monitor, review. Are there any other sort of official duties or notifications employers need to know about?
Yes, there are a couple of other important regulatory duties to be aware of beyond the day-to-day management. First, reporting under RIDDOR. That's the reporting of injuries, diseases, and dangerous occurrences regulations.
RIDDOR, okay.
Under RIDDOR, you must report any diagnosed cases of Legionellosis in an employee if they've worked on cooling towers or hot and cold water systems at your site that are likely to be the source of the infection. That's a legal requirement for disease surveillance.
Right, so reporting actual cases. What's the second duty?
The second relates specifically to certain types of equipment. It's the notification of cooling towers and evaporative condensers regulations, often called NCTAC. If you have a cooling tower or an evaporative condenser on your site, you are legally required to notify your local authority in writing. You need to tell them where it is.
Just tell them you have one.
Yes, and you also need to notify them again if you decommission it or take it out of use permanently. The forms for this are usually available from your local authority's environmental health department.
What about other types of coolers?
Good point. Things like dry-wet coolers or condensers, which work a bit differently and don't rely solely on evaporation, might not need notification under NCTEC. However, you still need to assess them carefully against the NCTEC requirements, especially if they happen to spray water directly onto the heat exchanger surface as part of their process.
Yeah. Always best to check if you're unsure. And what's fascinating here, I think, is how these specific reporting and notification duties really highlight the public health aspect of Legionella control. It's not just about your site. It ensures wider oversight for community safety.
So, wrapping this all up, it's clear that managing Legionnaire's disease risks, well, it's not just another item on a compliance checklist, is it?
Not at all.
It's a really critical, multi-layered responsibility. It involves that careful risk assessment we talked about, having competent people in charge, focusing on prevention first, then rigorous control and monitoring, and definitely thorough record keeping. Ultimately, it seems it's all about protecting people's health through really diligent and quite intelligent management of something often hidden from view, our water systems.
Well put.
It makes you think, though. Considering how much we rely on these hidden water systems in almost every building, what other unseen risks might be lurking in the places we work or live or visit? And maybe how much responsibility do we all share, really, in making sure these critical precautions are actually being taken seriously everywhere?
That's a really profound question to end on.
We've really only scratched the surface today, of course, but hopefully this deep dive gives you a powerful starting point for understanding your obligations around Legionella control. And if you need more detail, especially on specific types of systems like cooling towers or spa pools, we definitely encourage you to explore the detailed guidance available directly from the HSE.